Nothing changes that. No amount of, I don't know, anything. As long as you have, family and good friends, that's all you need. And life just keeps on happening. The bull might come though. There are signs. There are a lot of signs. Hiring is increasing. People are asking for obnoxious numbers while hiring. So let me just tell you, okay, I don't know. Who am I to predict whether or not we're at the cusp of the bull? But interest rates are going down. If Trump comes, even better things might happen. And, that's good for everyone. But with that little bit of motivation, let's get into it. Am I recording? I'm recording. Audio is fine. Alrighty, time to share my screen, folks. And today, this is where we are in our React journey. Hopefully, basically not hopefully, this week, React should be finished. Like very small part of React. State management we still have to do. Styling in React we still have to do. Some not important, but concepts that are asked in interviews we might have to do. But you can create websites by next week when we cover Tailwind as well. After we're done with Tailwind, then really depends on us how deep we want to go into styling. Do we want to learn about libraries like ShadCN? Do we want to learn about how ShadCN works under the hood? So, we will see how things proceed. But until then, let's just go over the basics really quickly. In the offline video 1 and 2, I've covered everything from point 1 to point 14. In yesterday's class, we covered everything from point 15 to point 18. Today, we were supposed to cover 19 to 23. I am not starting with 19 because this is, even though it's a smaller concept, it will take a long time to digest. Specifically, the last hook over here, use brief. Other two you might be able to understand yourself as well. But let me cover this in an offline video and save half an hour today because I have to call it at 9:30. So we will not go through this right now. I will make an offline video on custom hooks. There might be one from cohort 2 as well, but let's not go. I'll probably post that one as well, but I'll redo another video on custom hooks today. We're going to understand some state management concepts in React. Specifically, we'll understand about the context API, the most, crude way to do state management before you get into state management libraries. The next part for us is going to be state management libraries. The next set of videos after we do this is going to be state management libraries and styling. So before we get there, let's quickly go through the not a popular way, but one way to do state management in React, which is context API. And a lot of times you use this and don't use state management libraries, something that we will discuss eventually. We'll kick things off with understanding rolling up the state and unoptimal renders. I don't know if this is a term. It's just one term to describe how React applications do state management. Hopefully by now we understand a little bit about state management. We understand about the use state hook, which will tell you, that is exactly what state management is managing that state variable. If you look at this code over here, let me not bombard you with this code just yet. But a React application, we have written some until now. They're easy to write. They're hard to maintain. It's very hard to do what's called state management in React. And that is where you should invest a lot of your time if in the long run you want this project to be maintained. You can roll up the state, but this is a bad thing. This is what you do when you learn React for the first time, get stuck in a few places, and then you roll the state up. We'll understand what that means. But this is an unoptimal way to do this. This causes a lot of re-rendering. So we will understand what this is. Even though for a small application, this doesn't matter at all. But as your application grows, you will start to see a lot of teething pains if you are rolling up the state. So let's understand what does it mean to roll up the state. As your application grows, you might find that multiple components need to access the same state variable. Multiple components need to access the same state, and instead of duplicating the state in each component, you can lift up the state to the lowest common ancestor. Little complicated, lowest common ancestor DSA concept, but it will be applied over here in React, allowing the common ancestor to manage it. A lot of jargon over here. Let's look at it from a visual perspective. What I mean over here is, okay, when you create your React application in the future, you might have a top level app component, which let's say renders another component called the light component, which renders two components, the light bulb component and the light switch component. And it might happen कि this component as well as this component need to access a state variable. इसको भी एक state variable चाहिए, इसको भी एक state variable चाहिए. तो what you do is you roll up the state. आप उस state variable को यहाँ store कर लेते हो. You store that state variable in this lowest common ancestor. You can store it over here. You can store it over here as well. आप ऊपर जहाँ भी रख सकते हो. You can keep that state variable anywhere you want up the chain. But it should be at least at its lowest common ancestor, at least over here. If the state variable is stored over here, so you can pass it down as a prop over here. Pass it down as a prop over here. Try to digest this diagram for a second. We will look at the code for this diagram very soon. Of course, for the people who have just joined, you would need to go through all the previous videos to understand this. I'm assuming basic React knowledge is done by now. Let's initialize a fresh React project. And inside this fresh React project, let's try to write this light bulb component. Let's create a website where you have light bulb functionality. I'll explain what the light bulb functionality is. Fairly simple. So step one, let's initialize an empty project. Would urge you to do the same if you want to follow along. Let me go to my projects folder, cohort 3. Oh, there is no. And then run the command npm create wheat at the rate of latest. What is the command that I ran? Npm create wheat at the rate of latest. This command will initialize an empty React project. We have done it many times. I'm going to speed through it. I'm going to call it state experiments, which is what we're running today. Select the framework as React, select the language as JavaScript, and then go to the state experiments folder, open it in Visual Studio Code. Go to app.jsx, the top level component, and delete all the code that is present over here. And simply return, let's say, hi there. What have I done? Initialize the React project, emptied up the app component, run npm install to install all the dependencies, everything that exists in package.json over here. What are the dependencies that exists? React and React DOM. These are the main dependencies. There are a bunch of dev dependencies as well, but these are the two big dependencies that you will find in an initial React project. Eventually we will add more. Npm install to install the dependencies. Npm run dev to start the project. When I start the project, let me open the project on the left. Let me open Google Chrome on the right. This is what I see for my, for the code that is written on the left. This component renders hi there on the screen. Think of this like the top level HTML that is rendering on my React website. It has a bunch of styles because I have written them in app.css. If you want, you can get rid of them. Let me remove all the styles in app.css. Let me also remove all the styles in index.css. Okay? Initialized an empty project, which looks fairly ugly on the right. This is the code for it. If I write hi there to here, that is what appears over here. Now we have to create a website which is called the light bulb website. Basically, there needs to be a button that I click on. When I click on the button, a light bulb should go on. When I click on it again, it should go off. I need to toggle the state of a light bulb. How can I write it? Harkirat, you can dump everything in this component. आप यहीं पे लिख सकते हो कि button toggle, and above here you can, whatever, write bulb on and create a ugly website like this. But let's structure our website into components. Only then will we be able to understand the concepts we need to learn today. Let's replace this with a real bulb image that is on and off. Let's put this inside another component. So let me, in my app component, render a light bulb component. क्या यहाँ पे मैं अपना सारा logic लिखूंगा. I am going to write all of my logic here. Let me define light bulb component. And here, let me return a div where I render two more components. I am creating a very long component chain to understand state management better. You can of course shove all of this logic here as well. But for me, today, we are going to create a separate component called bulb state, let's say, and another component called toggle bulb state. These are the two more components I want to render or create. The bulb state component will return an image, light bulb on or light bulb off image. That is what I have to write over here. And then the toggle bulb state component will return a button that lets you toggle the button state or like toggle the bulb. As simple as that, nothing too complicated. Hopefully we understand this. Top level app component renders a light bulb component, which renders a bulb state component and a toggle bulb state component. Have we seen this a few seconds ago? What did the diagram look like? There was the top level app component, this guy right here, which rendered a light component. That is what I have rendered over here. That is the first child of this component. It only has one child over here called light. Technically, it has a child called div, which has a light bulb child, but we are ignoring div completely right now. You can also do this if you want to be technically more correct. Directly return light bulb from here. But for us, we're just wrapping it inside a div. App renders light bulb, which has two children. This has child number 1 and child number 2. This child and this child. Now, what do I want? I want a state variable. मुझे एक bulb state variable चाहिए ना यहाँ पे. I need a bulb state variable on off that will be. So what will I do? I will define a bulb. What should we call it? Let's call it bulb on, set bulb on. You can probably choose a better name for it. I'm defining a state variable here called bulb on. I am initializing it to true. And here I can write conditional rendering logic. I can write if bulb is on, then render bulb on. If bulb is off, then render bulb off. This is what I render on the screen. This is good. If we want, we can replace this with images as well. Abhi ke liye, let's just stick to this much. Let's see, does it work? If I go to localhost:5173, I see bulb on rendered over here because this variable is initialized to true. If bulb on is true, then render bulb space on. That is what renders over here. And then there is a button below it, toggle the bulb, which is rendered in the toggle bulb state component, this component right here. Very simple React application. I've just broken it down into a bunch of components, but you can write all of this logic here as well. You will still see the same thing. Will this work? What is the problem in this specific code that we have written? The problem is, here is the state variable and I need to update the state variable here. ये जो set bulb on component है, this set bulb on component needs to be present here, not component, variable needs to be present here. I need to roll this down here somewhere. There is a component that I defined here in this bulb state component. यहाँ पे मैंने एक state variable define कर दिया. I defined a state variable over here, but I want to use it over here. I defined it in this child. I want to use it in this child. So here I need to roll up the state. Here I need to take this state यहाँ से and roll it up to the least common ancestor. This guy needs it and this guy needs it. This guy needs bulb on variable. This guy needs set bulb on variable. So let me roll the state up. If I keep it over here, so I cannot access it over here. इस variable को यहाँ पहुँचाना is very tricky and something you should never do. You can find a weird way to actually propagate this set bulb on variable to the toggle state function, but you should not. That's an anti pattern. This is a very common question. Can you pass props up the chain? Hopefully we understand props by now. Props we send from parent to child. Can you send props from child to parent? You can, in a very weird way. I can show you using callbacks, but you shouldn't usually. That's an anti-pattern. If there is something that this guy uses and this guy uses, उसको यहाँ डाल दो ना. Put that thing over here and pass bulb on as a prop over here. Pass set bulb on as a prop over here. That way, our state variable is defined here. One part of it goes here, other part of it goes here. ठीक है? I also need to catch these. यहाँ पे I am sending it down. Here I need to get that variable bulb on. Set bulb on. And now this renders perfectly. Let's see, does our application change? No, it still looks the same. Bulb on is defined because this state variable is initialized to true. If I initialize it to false, it says bulb off. If I initialize it to true, it says bulb on. The only thing that is left is toggling it. इस पे click करूं तो बदल जाए. Is that simple enough? We have the button. What do we want? We want a on-click handler on the button. कि whenever this button is clicked, call a function called toggle. Let me define a function over here. Call it toggle. And here I'm going to call set bulb on. I'm going to pass it a function now. This part we have explained a few times, but might still feel jarring. Okay, what I'm doing over here, current state, not current state. This might be a little jarring for a few people. This line of code will toggle the state. If it was true, it will make it false. If it was false, it will make it true. How does that happen? Because when you call set bulb on and the argument that you send in, if that argument is a function, अगर ये argument जो आप दे रहे हो, you can give it something like 10,000 or false. But if you give it a function as an argument, तो that function में you get the current state कि अभी तो ये true है, and then you can return कि I want to convert it to false. If this feels jarring, you can also do this set bulb on function current state. If current state is true, then you return false. Else return true. So you can write this in a more longer fashion as well if this is more easier to digest, or you can write it like this. You can write it a third way also. You can pass bulb on as a prop over here. You can. This is the simplest way to do it or understand it. Okay, bulb on will be passed as a prop to this guy as well. यहाँ पे set bulb on will come and bulb on will also come. This will come as well as this will come. And now I don't have to do any of this complicated logic. I can simply say set bulb on, not bulb on. जो current value है उसको flip कर दो. Set the bulb to be the opposite of what it was already. So what have I done? I moved the state variable over here. The value I sent to the left component. The value was sent to this guy. The value as well as the updater function was set to the right guy. The value and the second thing, both of these are sent to this component. And here, if you look at it, the button says that whenever someone clicks on it, this function will get called. What does this do? Calls set with the opposite value of the current value. अगर अभी true है तो false, अभी false है तो true. Does it work? Seems like it is working. So we have a basic bulb application running locally. Let's go through the code one more time. In the top level app component, I render light bulb. In the light bulb component, I define a state variable, and then some part of the state I pass to the first component. Both of these I pass to the second component. And in the first component, I simply render the state. In the second component, I render a button. When you click on the button, state flips. This line will flip the state variable from true to false or false to true. This is what it means to roll up the state. कि यहाँ पे नहीं define कर सकते. If you define it over here, you can't use it over here. If you define it over here, you can't use it over here. So roll it up to a parent. ideally just the least common ancestor. This one is good enough. But if you want, you can roll it up to app as well. If you want, you can take this state variable and define it at the top and just pass them to the light bulb component as well. So if you want, you can define it over here. But this is also good enough. The least common ancestor. करते करते जो पहला ancestor मिला, that is common to both of them. The least or lowest common ancestor, lowest common ancestor is what we want to find. Cool. Do we understand rolling up the state? You will do this very often in your journey. कि सबसे पहले you will define a state variable here, and then you will realize I have to use it here. Then you will move it over here. Then you will realize I have to use it in another variable. करते करते you will roll up your state over here. आप अपनी सारी state application की top पे डाल दोगे. Most ugly React code bases, you will see the first component app में सब यही defined होता है कि अच्छा bulb state, user state, set user state, whatever, something like this. And if this is a chat application, then all the messages, set messages that are present in this chat application are also present here, so on and so forth. You will find a very big state array or bunch of state variables at the top component. This is called rolling up your state. It's bad practice. You should not do it. But shuru mein this is what you will do until you understand state management. Do we understand rolling up the state? Let me show you. Go back to the slides. Do we understand rolling up the state and unoptimal re-renders? This is not the optimal way to do it. Why? There are many reasons we can talk about. Re-rendering happens too much here. All right. कोई बात नहीं. We can talk a bit. Only 84%. 90 would have been good because this is a simple concept. Let's answer Q&A for 2 minutes. Then I will proceed. Why are we passing the bulb on and set bulb on again in every component? I'm not passing it in every component. I am passing bulb on to this guy because this guy needs it. इसके basis पे ही तो it will render on or off. I am passing the set to the other guy because it will need it. It will need to call it to flip the state. Why can't we maintain a global state like ZooStand? That's what we're coming to. Okay. The better way to do this is use a state management library like ZooStand. This is when you have no knowledge of state management libraries. You are back in 16, 17 when state management libraries don't exist. Tab you would do this. Please explain the last called function. I would assume you mean this. We say कि जब भी आप button पे click करोगे, whenever you click on this button, what did I do? We say whenever you click on this button, then the state flips from. What happens? This toggle function gets called. आप इस button पे click करोगे, toggle function gets called. यहाँ पे मैं क्या करता हूँ? I call set on a state variable to flip its value. True थी तो false, false थी तो true. A lot of people are asking about the code. You can find the code for it in the slides. Let me paste a link in the chat. You can find the code over here. I think Akash already did it. Let me also do it. You'll find the code in the slides. The code that you will find in the slides is slightly prettier. Oh, you actually won't. This is a different code. Yeah, this is a different code. Let me paste the code that I have for the light bulb component as well. So you guys can see that as well. Rolling up the state. At the end, I am adding light bulb example. You can look at the code over here. All right. Few more questions. Why are we rendering two components in light bulb? In light bulb, why are we rendering two components? Because the first component is rendering the value, the bulb. Second is rendering the button. Now you might ask, your question I think is, Kirat, why am I not doing this directly over here? यहीं पे डाल देता हूँ ना. Let me put this over here. Let me put all of this logic. Let me put a button directly over here. Why do I have to create multiple components? एक ही जगह कर लेने दो ना सब. That is a good question. This will also do the same thing. कितना छोटा हो गया code? Code is trimmed down. Everything is present in the light bulb component. You can do this, but we want to learn about state management. ऐसा थोड़ी है your full Facebook application will be one component. It will be multiple components, right? We don't want to create an application as big as Facebook, which is why we are showing okay, the application is structured in various components. Of course, this will do the same thing. Either you don't have to do any prop passing, anything like that. What is the optimal way? Using state management libraries. Go to the last slide. Is it good for authentication? I don't know what that means. Can I write this outside? Can I write? Someone asked. That's a good question. Someone asked, can I write this function outside? Do you have access to set bulb on outside? No. You only have it access to it inside the component tree. So you cannot define this variable outside. You have to define this variable inside. To recap one more time, I have a question. What does useState return? Last question, then I will recap and then we will proceed. useState returns an array. Again, you should go back to the offline videos. It returns an array, the state variable and a function. It returns an array of 2 elements. We destructure the array over here. We get the state variable, put its value in this variable. We get the function, put its value over here. That is what useState returns. To recap everything, we learned about rolling up the state. We learned, okay, whenever you have an application like this, where there is another example in the slides, but let's say the light bulb experiment that I'm talking about. We have a top level app component. If we want, we can put the state over here, and yahan se we can pass down all the elements. Or what I have done is I have put the state variable over here. ये जो light bulb component है, here I have defined the state variable यहाँ पे, and I am passing some values to the left component, this guy right here, specifically this variable, some values to the right component, specifically this and this. Both of them I am passing to the right one. Why? Because left वाले को इसकी ज़रूरत है. The left component needs the bulb on variable. The right component needs the bulb on variable and the set bulb on variable. That is why I am passing both of them to the right. This is leading to an application that looks like this, that lets you turn on and turn off bulbs. That is what we have learned until now in the first, let's say 30 minutes. Rolling up the state. To recap, as your application grows, you might find that multiple components need access to the same state. In our case, this component and this component needed access to the same bulb on state. So we rolled it up to its lowest common ancestor, this guy right here, and passed it down as props. Bulb on, yahan chala gaya. Set bulb on and bulb on, yahan chala gaya. That way, you have a React application that works. It will not work if you define the state variable here. Ab state variable yahan defined hoga, then you cannot pass it up the chain and pass it over here. That is very hard to do. So you roll up the state to the lowest common ancestor. In our case, that is exactly what we have done. This is the component on the left. Bulb state is this component. Toggle bulb state is this component. Inka parent kya hai? Its parent is light bulb component, this one right here. This has the state definition. This is something you have to do. But the question is there a better way to do this? And someone mentioned it in the Q&A as well. Okay, why not use something like Zoosta and Harkirat, which is a state management library? That is what we are getting to. How can you use state management libraries to make this code slightly more optimal? If you did not understand this part, I'll try to answer in a few doubts. I've recapped it a few more times. I would assume it's somewhere in 85 to 90% range now. Let's move on to the next slide. Because even if you did not understand this, you should be able to understand prop drilling next, which is again, a lot of these are things. If you are, the person who just started React, you will do this and see that something ugly is happening here. You wouldn't know the name for it. The way we are learning is I'm first introducing the term, and then you are hoping kalko I will see prop drilling. But if you are a React developer first, and let's say you have not gone through any courses, just started to write React code, then you would do this. You would feel कि यार कुछ ugly सा हो रहा है. I don't like the way the code is propagating. And then you would Google the term, you would figure out that is called prop drilling. So the next thing we are learning about is prop drilling. A few people mentioned, I forgot to go through the props slide in the offline video. So let me take you through props and prop drilling, both one after the other. Prop drilling, let's go through props first. Props क्या है? Basically arguments to these components. यहाँ पे there is a state variable. I am sending it down as a prop. Bulb on is a prop to the bulb state component. I repeat, bulb on is a prop to the bulb state component, and similarly bulb on and set bulb on are props to the toggle bulb state component. So there are two components that we have defined, and in both of them we are passing in some props. This is what is called a prop. What we are learning about is prop drilling, which is something you might already be able to guess. Okay, prop drilling, what could that mean? Let's understand that next. Hopefully we understand props. I can define any variable, let a equal to 1, and pass that down as a prop over here. Okay, this variable I've defined, I'm passing it as a prop to the bulb state component. I can destructure that prop over here, and if I want, I can use that prop over here. I am passing the prop down to a component. If I look at the final code, you will see bulb on and 1 is rendered over here because I defined 1 over here, but I passed it down as a prop to the bulb state component, this guy. It got a over here and rendered it over here. Okay, the a value is this. That is what you see over here. Question is, what is prop drilling? Abhi tak we have been sending down the props. What is prop drilling? Prop drilling occurs when you need to pass data from a higher level component down to a lower level component that is several layers deep in the component tree. This is an important statement. It occurs if you have a state that looks like this. If there is a variable that is needed over here and needed over here, but is defined over here, there is a state variable जो आपने define यहाँ किया है. For some reason, you have not defined it over here. You have defined it over here. Let's say there is another component that uses it. Let's say app has another child that uses it. This guy uses it. This guy uses it. This guy uses it. So it's been rolled up to the lowest common ancestor, which is this guy. यहाँ पे there is a state variable that light bulb wants to use and light switch wants to use. Light does not need it. This function will not use bulb on. This function will not use set bulb on. There is a phantom component in the middle जिसका काम है बस prop लेना. Its job is to take the prop from the upper component, send it down to the lower component. What was the definition? Prop drilling occurs when you need to pass data from a higher level component down to a lower level component that is several layers deep in the component tree. I want to pass data from a higher level component to not my immediate child, but to a child that is several layers deep. मुझे यहाँ से यहाँ भेजना है data. I want to take a state variable from here and send it over here. Sort of need to teleport it over there. कि state variable यहाँ चला जा. I can't do that directly, at least with the knowledge that we have until now. You can't send it from here to here. You have to drill it down the props. You first have to send it from here to here, then have to send it from here to here. This is what is called prop drilling. Okay, if this is a component that has some data, uska ek deeper child needs to use it. This guy wants to use it. That is one layer deeper. So you can't teleport this directly over here. You send it to a child, which sends it to both of these guys. You drill it down the prop chain. Let's see it in action. I want to define a state variable in my app component. Let me do that. ये जो bulb on component है और state variable है, let me define it over here. I want to send it from here to the light bulb component. I am not rendering, oh sorry, the naming is a little different. You get it right. This is the light component. And let me just make it same as the diagram. Light bulb, and then this is light switch. This is what my code looks like. App component, which has a state variable. It is passing it down to the light component. Let me pass it down. Actually, I haven't done it yet. Bulb on equal to bulb on. Set bulb on equal to set bulb on. I passed it down to my child. The child, this light component, is going to get it as its arguments, bulb on, set bulb on. And then the child is just sending it down. The child isn't using it. यहाँ पे कहीं थोड़ी I have written के let me render bulb on, let me used bulb on. No. This guy is simply taking it from above, sending it below. It is taking it from above and sending it to the two children. It is drilling the prop down. What if there was another child below? मान लो this guy needed it and another child below it needed it. Then I would have had to drill it to here, which would drill it to here, which would drill it to the final leaf. So this is just very ugly, right? I mean, you might not feel very ugly right now. ये code ठीक ही लग रहा है हर कीरत. But as your state becomes very big, then you'll be passing everything from here. Messages, set, messages, user, set user. Your whole prop chain would look very ugly. Some of them you will send over here then, messages equal to messages. Other ones you will send over here, user equal to user, so on and so forth. Throughout you will see such ugly components passed. And if a new developer comes, he will also come and be like, Achha, I want to use set user. He will add another one over here. It will become highly unreadable. Specifically for this component, so it makes zero sense. क्योंकि ये तो use भी नहीं कर रहा. It is not using this guy, this guy, this guy. Nothing it is using. It is just passing it नीचे. It is not rendering messages over here. It is not rendering the user information over here. It is just passing everything down the chain. So this is like a anti-pattern. Why is this an anti-pattern? Why is this a bad thing? Because your code will become highly unreadable, unusable, hard to maintain if you are passing things down the prop chain like this. Let's go back to the slides. This often leads to two issues. Number one, complexity. You may have to pass the props through intermediate components that don't use the props themselves. Example, the light component. It is not using either of these themselves. It is just passing it down the chain just to get them to the component that needs them, just to pass it down to the component that needs them. Maintenance, it can make the code harder to maintain, read, as changes in the prop structure require updates to multiple components. Yes, this is another thing. अब अगर कल को if I have to introduce a new component or if I have to change इसका name, then I will have to change it 1, 2, or let's say I have to change the name of this guy. I'll have to change it here, 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 and then here, and then here, and then here, and then everywhere. पूरी prop chain में I will have to change the name of this variable. Wouldn't it be easier if somehow I define a state variable over here and simply extract it over here? यहाँ पे define किया, यहाँ पे ले लिया. Don't have to pass it down the prop chain. Wouldn't my code look much cleaner if rather than it looking like this, it simply looks like this? कि यहाँ पे the light component is rendering, here the light bulb component is rendering, here the light switch component is rendering. This guy doesn't need any state variables. Very nice component tree to read through. Of course, we have to figure out यहाँ पहुंचेगा कैसे. How will the state variable reach here is something we need to figure out. But at least in terms of readability, it looks pretty good. If somehow I can get the value here, const bulb on equal to get bulb on, let's say. Somehow I can teleport the value from here to here. Then this code is much more readable. I will simply use the variable over here. I have defined it over here. If I have to change its name, I will just have to change it over here and change it over here. Change it in two places. Beach wale component mein I don't have to change any of the names. So do we understand the problems with prop drilling? There's also another problem. Well, this isn't prop drilling specific, so let's not go here okay, what exactly this problem is. But do we understand what is prop drilling? And why is it bad? We understand it. Great. Question is, how do you fix it? Here comes one of many ways you can fix it. The context API being the first one. API क्या होता है to begin with? Application Programming Interface. Whatever we are using over here that comes from React is the React API. UseState is a React Application Programming Interface. React is sort of a framework, an application. If I want to program using it, UseState is a function that lets me interface with it. I'm trying to use every word over here, but don't get confused by the term context API. It basically means until now we have learned about use state API, use effect API. Today we are going to learn about the context API. What does it fix? It fixes prop drilling, seeda. It fixes some things, doesn't fix other things. We'll understand what it fixes, what it does not fix. The things that it does not fix, we will use a state management library for, something like Recoil or something like MobX or something like, ZooStand that someone mentioned. The context API is a powerful feature in React that enables you to manage state across your application more effectively, especially when dealing with deeply nested components. That is where we were seeing the problem, prop drilling in deeply nested components. Context API lets you fix it. The context API provides you a way to share values, state, functions, etc. between components without having to pass them down as props. If you want to share a state variable with a deeply nested child, you can use the context API. That way, you don't have to pass it down the prop chain. यहाँ से उठेगा, वहाँ teleport हो जाएगा. That variable will start from here, get teleported over there. Let's see how. There are 3 functions that you have to use, or 3 jargon that you have to know when you're using the context API. This is where things get a little complicated, because when you are defining a state variable, it is as simple as doing this. One line of code will let you define a state variable, pass it down your prop chain. But defining the context of an application, or defining a fresh context using the context API requires you to do 3 things. You can actually do just 2 things also, but usually you would want to do all 3 of these things. Number 1, create the context. What does the term context mean? What do you get when you hear the term context? It means data for some part of your code. This is the context of my chat application. मेरी chat application का context है. The context of my chat application is, let's say, something like messages. The context of my Twitter application is something like tweets. Instagram is something like posts. So the term context means कि this is the context of something specific. यहाँ पे हम अपनी bulb state store करेंगे. Here we will store our bulb state. So that is what the term context means. If you have done Golang, then you might have heard this term there as well. It is used to pass, the context of a request through a chain of functions. So context is a more generic term. यहाँ पे this specific API, just like use state is an API, context is an API. Step 1, if you want to propagate your bulb state, if you want to, it's not here, but if you want to propagate this variable from here directly to light bulb, step 1 is you have to create a context for it. कि यहाँ पे मैं store करूँगा. This is my context storing my bulb state. So this is created using react.createContext. क्या एक context बना दो मेरा. यहाँ पे मैं I will store the variables that I want to teleport. It serves as the container for the data you want to share. What data do we want to share? We want to share this bulb on and set bulb on to various components below me. So I want to create a context for these 2 variables. I can do that by calling react.createContext. So let's do that. Step 1. Let's define a context outside the component chain. Whenever you create a context, you don't create it here inside the component chain. Const context equal to something. The context is created outside your component chain, either in a separate file, usually in a separate file. For now, we'll just stick it over here, but you should ideally store it in a separate file called like the context.ts, जहाँ पे you should store your context. अभी के लिए I am just storing it over here. Const bulb context equal to react.createContext, or you can simply import create context from here and call create context. Either is fine. Const bulb context equal to create context. यहाँ पे मैं bulb का data store करूँगा. I will store my bulb data over here and I will use it everywhere. I don't have to define it in a component and send it down a component chain. I have defined it outside the components. I will consume it from outside the components. I will consume it over here. What did I write? You get bulb on type function. If we get, then our life is sorted. So I can do something like, get bulb on bulb context, or, get context, let's say bulb on, something like this. बिकॉज आई हैव डिफाइंड अ ग्लोबल कॉन्टेक्स्ट वेरिएबल कि ये मेरा डेटा स्टोर करेगा. कौन सा डेटा? वॉट डेटा विल इट स्टोर? दैट इज वॉट इज डिफाइंड इन पॉइंट 2. Provider. This will get complicated. There are two ways to do this. We are going with the more difficult one right now. This component wraps parts of your application and provides the context values to all its descendants. This is super important. This component wraps part of your application, provides the context value to all its descendants. Any component that it's the child of the provider can access the context. This will be a very hard statement to digest. If you have gone through the Solana classes, you might remember we had a Solana wallet adapter or provider over there. Solana model provider over there. Wallet model provider over there. I said we will understand this when we reach the context API. This is that. The provider provides your context API, provides your context to all the children. So in this case, I want कि जो light component है, I might want to use the context here, even though we don't. जो light bulb component है, I will need to use the context over here. The light switch component, here I will need to use the context. So step 2 is wrapping your components inside a provider. Let's make this capital. Bulb context. Wrap your application inside a bulb context dot provider. This is the second hard bit. What did it say? This component wraps part of your application. This is a part of my application. For me, though, it's my full application. But you can also wrap some parts of your application. I could have put this bulb context provider yahan pe bhi, right below the div. Because just this guy and this guy needs to consume the context. Context doesn't need to be consumed by the light component, right? Isko to zarurat nahi hai. So I have wrapped the light component, but if I want, I can wrap just these two as well. The component wraps parts of your applications and provides the context value to all its descendants. ये जो context value है, जो आपने context create किया है, the place where you are going to store this and this, they get provided to all its descendants. अब this guy wants to use it, it can. This guy wants to use it, it can. So you have to use this provider for providing the value to all the children. You have to wrap your application inside such providers. If you go back to the Solana classes, we wrapped our application inside a Solana wallet provider, something like this, if you remember. And then another two. Over there also we were using the context API. Here also we are using the context API. We have defined the context, step 1. We have wrapped our application inside the context, step 2. Harkirat, why have you not done it over here? ऐसे क्यों नहीं किया आपने? Why did you not wrap the div? It wouldn't matter. All my children will get access. All the children of this component tree will get access to this context. I only want this guy and this guy to access it. I don't want this div to access it anyways. So it doesn't matter if this div gets wrapped or not. So let me wrap my application like this. When you are defining the provider, then you also define कि क्या भेजना है नीचे. What is this context holding? The value. Here I will write, here I want to send down an object. I repeat, I am saying I want to send down an object whose bulb on key is bulb on that I've defined over here. Whose set bulb on key is this. If I wanted to pass just a string, so I could have been like, I'll pass something like this, let's say. If I wanted to pass something like, my name, I would pass it down like this. What do I want the context to hold? This variable and this variable. यही दो variable तो हैं that I want to access here and here. Some of them I want to access here. Other ones I want to access here. So I say, here I am going to pass down the bulb on and the set bulb on keys, and the value of this is ये state variable right here and ये state variable right here. I can also name this something else. I can be like, a bulb is what I want to store as an object. इसका मतलब ये है कि इस context में store क्या हो रहा है? What is getting stored inside the context? Right now, inside this context object, I am storing an object which has a bulb on key, जिसकी कुछ value है, and a set bulb on key, which also has some value. If I want, I can store a third key over here, name Harkirat, let's say something like this. So you can put like a very complex object in your context. I am just putting two things, this and this. I have provided the values. I just need to consume the values next. I don't have to define them over here. I don't have to pass them down the prop chain. I can simply say const bulb on equal to use context, bulb context. That is it. Use context. Where does use context come from? It comes from React. So what did I say? Step 1, define the context. Step 2, provide the value that you want children to have. And step 3, consume the context. कि यहाँ पे I want to consume the bulb variable, bulb on variable. यहाँ पे I want to consume the bulb on variable and the set bulb on variable. These two variables I want to consume here. Bulb on variable I want to consume here. Harkirat, why is this an object? Because use context will return you the full object. इस object में there are two keys, bulb on, set bulb on. So you can destructure the object over here. You have two keys, right? Let me just destructure those two keys, and बाकी की application तो is exactly the same. It works also the same. But prop drilling went away. I had to write some very complex logic here. I had to create something called the context. But once that was done, the application looks clean. I don't have to pass down, A equal to A, B equal to B, and then consume them here and then pass them down. The value of this bulb on and set bulb on got teleported directly to the light bulb component, got teleported directly to the light switch component. They did not have to go through this specific, middle component. Let's see, does it work? It doesn't work yet, because I still have these arguments. Let me get rid of them. There is still a bug over here. I'm sure some of you can see it already. Let me see if the naked eye can catch it. It cannot. Open the console. A is not defined. Let me get rid of this extra logic, and there we go. Our application works. We'll go through the code one more time. But our application works without any prop drilling. If you ignore this extra thing I had to add, let me remove it. If you ignore that extra thing, it's such a beautifully written application. It has no prop drilling inside. I don't have to pass in props from here to here to here. I can read through it very well. This renders the light component, which renders the light bulb component, which is rendering the bulb. I don't care where the state comes from, as long as it comes from somewhere. Pehle we were passing it as props. Now we are consuming it from the context. How did we create the context? Step 1. We defined the context over here by calling create context. Step 2. We provided the context over here. Step 3. We consumed the concept over here. 3 things you have to do to use the context API. There is one more, addition we can do on top, which we will do very soon. Do we understand the context API? ये समझ आ गई? तो state management is actually much easier than this. This is the slightly complicated way to do state management. When we do recoil, recoil and ZooStand are easy to do. Redux has some whole jargon in itself. But when we use some other state management libraries, you will see our life becomes much easier than, creating context. Even though from time to time you have to do this also. So you should be comfortable with this. You will see this in code bases. You should use this in your code bases as well. Let's do a poll. Also, you can define this in a separate file, like I said, you don't have to define it over here. Define it in a separate file, import it over here if you want to keep your component clean. Poll hasn't started, so let me try to start the poll myself. Oh, there you go, it just started. Great. Ish, slowly going down. 86% is not bad at all. Let me give, one more thing we have to do. And then, then we're done with some experiments and good to go. I'll do doubts after that. This is good, but do you remember in the React world, in the Solana world, let me open those slides and don't get overwhelmed for the non-Solana people over here. If you look at the wallet adapter and let me show you the thing that I'm looking for. Local launch, there you go. I'll spend 20 more seconds here. If I'm not able to find it, I will stop. Where is it? I want to show you a React application that sort of uses this context API. Let's see if Akash has found it already. He's usually fast. There we go. Thank you, Akash sir. Akash sir should be very appreciated. Oh no, that's the wrong slides. That's slides for today. My bad. He should not be appreciated. Where is that? I want to show you a real world example of what we're trying to build next. It's not here, which is very surprising. It should be here. Add this. There you go. Look at this component. Don't get too overwhelmed. But if you remember when we were creating the token launchpad in the Solana cohort, in the Web3 cohort, we wrote all of the logic here, the token launchpad logic, but we wrapped it inside a lot of providers. Connection provider, wallet provider, wallet model provider. These were also using the context APIs. Notice that I have wrapped my application inside a bunch of providers. Are we doing the same thing over here? What are we doing over here? I have wrapped my application inside a provider. It looks a little ugly though. यहाँ पे bulb context dot provider is written. यहाँ पे simply wallet model provider is written. Wallet provider is written. It doesn't have a dot in the middle. It's some sort of a custom component. And ours isn't, a custom component. Ours directly uses the context API. Ours doesn't hide. I repeat, ours doesn't hide that we are using context. Basically, if you are creating a library in the future, you don't want to expose your context provider like this. Dot provider use kar lo. No, that is not what these guys are doing. Connection provider comes from an external library. Where does it come from? It comes from @Solana/wallet adapter React. Wallet adapter comes from @Solana/wallet adapter React. They don't give you a context. They don't export the context. They export a component. How can you create a similar component? How can you create a component called, let's say, bulb provider that, you wrap your application inside? This looks much cleaner, right? Bulb provider, something like this. This looks much cleaner than the whole big blob that we had written. How can I create a bulb provider component that has all the, context management logic so that I don't have to put it over here? Just create a wrapper component. We have done some wrapper components when we understood children in the offline videos. Create a wrapper component, bulb provider, which will take some children as an input. What are the children? In this case, it is this light component. Children क्या होते हैं? Whatever you write inside the component is what comes in this children prop. Basically, in this case, the children prop will look something like this. It will have the light component. I get the children over here. And यहाँ पे put all of your provider logic. यहाँ पे put all of your state logic. Create a simple bulb provider. Just how these guys have created a context provider, wallet provider, wallet model provider. Whatever variables you need, define them in that component. Create a wrapper component yourself. You can do things without it as well, but this is a more cleaner way to do it. Okay, define whatever you need over here. Take some children as an input and render those children inside the bulb context provider. I know some of you are confused. I'll take you through the code again. But what I'm doing over here is creating a separate function, which eventually we will hide. We will put it in a separate file. We will hide it from our main logic over here. Our main logic now looks so much cleaner. Bulb provider, light, khatam. Light bulb, light switch, khatam. This guy gets the variable from somewhere, uses it over here, khatam. This guy gets some variables from here, uses them over here. Because I put all the ugly logic, all the providing logic in a wrapper component. What is a wrapper component? Here I will wrap my main application around this component. तो इस component में होगा क्या? It will take some children as an input, which in our case is this light component, and it will wrap that light component. यहाँ पे light component आ जाएगा. It will wrap it inside this bulb context.provider. That way, the logic that we had written over here has just been moved out into our custom bulb provider. We have created a custom bulb provider. यहाँ पे, wrap your main application like this. Now, if you are a library, if you create a bulb library.js tomorrow, then you can just export this from there. Whoever is using your bulb library will simply use the context and, doesn't have to worry about calling dot provider, defining a state, putting the state, so on and so forth. Do we understand creating our own custom provider? If you understand wrapper components, then this might have been easy. If you have not gone through the offline videos where we understood about this children prop, then this might be a little harder. Let me see if it works. It breaks right now. So I'm missing something obvious. Let's see what that is. I'm missing nothing. What am I missing? I know you guys can see it. I'm just trying to see if I can see it. Nothing in the console. All right, who can see it? Tell me. What am I missing? Return? Oh yeah, thank you, sir. Forgot to return the component. Appreciate it. Dolly Singh, I think that was your name. Now I see it. What did I do? I forgot to return this from the component. It was similar to me doing this. Return to kiya nahi, just define kar diya wahan pe. So I just returned the bulb context provider, which renders the children inside. I know this is a little, it works as expected. I know it's a little complicated to understand. But let's say, if you remember the cards, if you did not understand this, you should go back to the offline video and go through this children's, this thing and create this card component. This also is very similar. I take some children as an input, wrap them inside a div which has some styles. What are we doing? I'm taking some children as an input, wrapping them inside a context provider. So all of this logic is hidden from my main app component. थोड़ा छुप गया कहीं जाके. Do we understand this? This got a little confusing. Let's do Q&A for 2-3 minutes. There's not much left. Now there are a bunch of experiments that will show you this is a little unoptimal, and then you should use state management to make it more optimal. Well, let me look at Q&A really quickly. I'm sure there's no question. I just need to recap it. Recap. Rolling up and prop drilling में फर्क क्या है? Sure. Recap. If you have multiple states, then how to do that? Okay. What is the difference between prop drilling and rolling up state? Okay. Let's kick things off with the first question, which is, what is the difference between prop drilling and rolling up the state? Very different things, similar to what's the difference between, use state and lists and keys. इतना ज़्यादा फर्क है दोनों में. Rolling up the state means okay, you move your state up the chain. You have to do this. इसके बिना तो काम होगा ही नहीं. If there is something you want to use here and use here, you define that state variable here, and then you pass it down as a prop. This does not have prop drilling. If I define a state variable here, pass it here, pass it here, pass it here, I have just passed it down as a prop. No prop drilling. But if I define a variable here and pass it over here, यहाँ से यहाँ पे via props, यहाँ से यहाँ पे via props, then again via props, that is prop drilling. So sending it down multiple children when the children in the middle are not using it is what is called prop drilling. What is rolling up the state? Okay, if something this guy needs, and this guy needs, put it over here so that you can pass it down as props. That's the first question. Second question was context API recap. I'll do that. Redux versus context API is better. State management libraries are better. I'll come to why, but they are better. Why do you have to send bulb context inside the wrapper? Why do we have to send the bulb context inside the wrapper? I am not sending this anywhere. Okay. This was our original app. Let me revert to our original thing that everyone understood. Creating a custom thing is where things broke. This to everyone understood. Okay. We have our provider. Context API has three things. Number one, you create the context. Number two, you wrap your application inside the context provider. And number three, you start to consume the context wherever you want to. This everyone understood. This is good enough. This gives you all the benefits. Another thing you can do if you want is create your own wrapper component. What is a wrapper component? कि यार ये बहुत सारा कोड है. This is like too much code to look at for me in the app, which is the main part of my file. I don't want to see such big code blob over here. I don't want to see my state variable bulb on, set bulb on, something like this over here. Hurting my eyes when I see this. यार app component में मुझे देखना था क्या render होता है. I wanted to see what renders. And I see some state variables defined. I see some provider. Very complicated. Isn't this cleaner to look at? कि app component has some bulb provider / bulb provider. Light. Don't have to pass anything. Isn't this cleaner to look at? Yes, Harkirat. As soon as the first person, new developer comes to the team, he can clearly see, okay, there is a provider that's probably providing some context. And then there is the main light component, that is our application logic. Very clean code to look at. Question is, how can you convert this ugly code into that clean code? I have to create a component called bulb provider that does all of this. ये सारी चीजें जो मैं अभी मैनुअली कर रहा था, all of this that I had written by hand, I can just move all of this to a parent component के वहां कर देते हैं. I will create a wrapper component called bulb provider. And here, I will again define the state variable bulb on, set bulb on equal to use state true. I will again create the context, return bulb context.provider / bulb provider. And यहाँ पे I will say कि I am a wrapper component भाई. I am a wrapper component. Whoever is using me, send me some children. अपने अंदर कुछ डेटा भेज देना मुझे. Which in this case is this light component. तो जो light component यहाँ है, it will come as the children prop over here. I can pass components like this, children equal to light. You can also do this. This also does the same thing. Just how I was passing bulb on equal to true, I can pass children equal to this component. I can pass a component to another component. But the cleaner way to do it is this. Easier to look at, right? It's like a div के अंदर another tag. So whenever you have a component, जिसके अंदर you write more components, ये जो अंदर का logic होता है ना, all of this reaches the children prop over here. अगर मैंने यहाँ hi there लिखा होता and then hello if I've written, all three of these will reach the children prop over here. The children prop will look something like this. Hi, then light, and then hi or whatever, hello. This is what this children prop will look like. So I get the children prop, I render it over here. कि यार मेरे पास जो भी आप भेज रहे हो ना, what are we rendering in app? We are rendering the bulb provider. What is the bulb provider rendering? It is rendering first the context and then जो भी उसे अंदर मिला. And उसे अंदर क्या मिला? उसे अंदर ये light component मिला. So we've just moved all of that complicated logic into a separate provider rather than shoving it all in the main app component so that it looks a little bit cleaner. ये सारा logic जो है यहाँ आ जाता है. So bulb on equal to bulb on and set bulb on equal to set bulb on. Oh, bulb on. Can we do a poll? Do we understand creating our own providers? Now we understand. 90%. Slowly trickling down to 87. That's fine. Cool. Now some come experiments. I've mentioned some things here. These experiments will help you judge why state management libraries are better than the context API. Both provide you similar APIs. Both make your code base a little cleaner. But the context API doesn't optimize your code base. It doesn't optimize the number of re-renders, recoil, MobX, Zoostand, recoil. These libraries optimize re-renders as well. Let's understand what is optimizing re-renders. Why is it a good thing for you to do? And how does these libraries do it, but the context API doesn't? So let me write, take you through some other code. There's a lot of code here. This is yeah. Let me copy this code. I'll take you through it. Paste it over here and let me show it to you first what it looks like. It looks something like this. There is an increase button. You click on it, count goes up. There is a decrease button. You click on it, count goes down. How is it written? Oh, oopsie daisy. There is a count context that I have created. There is a count context provider that I have created. Yahan pe I have defined a count state variable. I am providing that count state variable in the count context provider. So I am providing those count and set count variables. This is my main app component, which renders the parent component. The app component renders the parent component. Let's go to the parent. सबसे पहले I wrap my application inside count context provider. I wrap my application here. Then I render an increase component, a decrease component and a value component. Increase component क्या कर रहा है? The increase component is rendering this button. Let's look at it. Increase component gets the count variable, gets the set count variable, gets it from the context. And when you click on the button, it sets count to count plus 1. What is the decrease component doing? Gets count and set count from the context. Declares a button. When you click on the button, set count minus 1. If this feels jarring, this syntax, you can define a decrease function here. Where you can do something like this, set count minus 1. So this, and the thing that we have written over here, do the same thing. Do not do this. This is incorrect. Button on click equal to set count is incorrect. If you want to do it inline, create a fresh arrow function जिसकी body में you are calling set count. Don't call set count directly over here. It will not work. It will just call set count, which returns undefined, and store undefined over here. So this is the right way to do. On clicks inline. You can do it, offline as well, or whatever. Roll it up like this as well. Cool. Hopefully this code is straightforward. Increase component, decrease component, value component. Increase component lets you increase the count. It's not working right now. Oh, what happened here? Yeah. Do you see infinite renders that came? That came because I used the arrow function incorrectly. It will infinitely render your application will break. This is the right syntax anyways. Increase increases this thing, decrease decreases it. ये जो increase component है, does it really use the count? No. Does it render the count? Not really. Can we get rid of the count over here? Yes, sir, Kirat. Remove the count and simply do set count. Count plus 1. Do we remember this syntax? Okay, there are two ways you can call the set of a state variable. What is it? We have count, set count equal to this thing. If I want to update the count, I can either do set count 5, let's say, or I can do set count, current count plus 1, something like this. What will this guy do? It will increase the count by 1. What will this guy do? It will set the count to the value 5. So this is another way to call the set variables. Why am I doing this? Because I want क्या जो decrease component है, यहाँ पे हम 0 render तो कर नहीं रहे. We are not rendering 0 here. So let me not pull that out from the context. I'm trying to avoid re-renders. We will see what that means. count, count minus 1. So now increase simply uses the set count function. Decrease simply uses the set count function. Value actually uses the count value because it needs to render it. Do we understand this code base to begin with? The code base where I have a parent component wraps everything inside a context provider, renders 3 components. The first one uses set count. The second one uses set count. The third one uses just count the actual value and renders it over. This will increase the value, but not render it. Decrease the value, not render it, render the value. Do we understand this code base? I'm assuming we do. So I'm going to proceed without a poll and happy to take doubts after. Let's do some performance benchmarking. If you have gone through the offline videos, you understand there is this thing called the React Dev Tools you can install. When you install them, you can right click. Oh, what's happening? Click on inspect. Go to the page. This page right here. Go to components, settings, and click on highlight updates when component re-renders. What have I checked? Highlight updates when component renders. Let me click on increase. Where all do you see a blue box? Harkirat, I see it on this increase button. I see it on this decrease button. I see it on the count component. I see it on the whole component. No, just these 3. This component pe I see a blue box. This component pe I see a blue box. Here I see a blue box. All 3 components re-render. As I click on this guy re-renders, this guy re-renders, and this guy re-renders. Did I change the count variable? Yes. Is this guy using the count variable? No. Then why is it re-rendering? You should only re-render something अगर उसकी body change हुई है, right? If I had written 8 over here, then it makes sense. So 8 से 9 हो गया. This component needs to re-render. But right now, this guy isn't even using the count variable. Is the increase function using the count variable? No, it is only using set count. Is the decrease component using count variable? No, it is just using set count. So why is this still re-rendering? Should it re-render? Probably not. Why am I focusing so much on this? Because eventually in React you are trying to minimize re-renders. You won't see any impact for such a small application. Even an application like Facebook, कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Do this. You are not optimizing re-renders to the core. If you are creating a 2D game, a 3D game in React, वहाँ पे you do. कि यार game is taking too much CPU. We need to minimize the number of re-renders. Here it doesn't matter. People don't care. But this is unoptimal. How can you make it optimal? There are a few ways. You can make this optimal using this context API as well. But the better way to do this is use a state management library. State management library. What is our state? The count and the set count variable. How are we managing it right now? Using the context API. How should you manage it? Using a state management library. There are many state management libraries. Redux, Recoil you might have heard of. Let's use one of them and see, can we write code that will help us not re-render these components that are not using the count. This guy is using the count. This will have to re-render. Yahan pe to you will see a blue box always because the value inside is changing. If you don't see a blue box, the value inside won't change. So when you click on these, this to should re-render, but you can avoid these two from re-rendering if you use a state management library or also in the context API. You can do a bunch of things. Let's look at how you can use the state management library that I'm talking about. There is a slide right next to this one, which you will not understand yet because, it uses recoil. I've not talked about recoil at all. So, you will be overwhelmed by Harkirat. What is an atom in recoil? What is the recoil root? What are you doing over here? So I will take you through the code, but if you don't understand the code, it is fine. This code is the same thing that we had written, but we will not use the context API. We will use a library called recoil for state management. I am not using useState over here. If you look at it, कहीं पे भी useState दिख रहा है? No. I am defining an atom in recoil, which is a place where you can store state, and it's highly optimized in understanding what should re-render what should not re-render. Let's try this code out. Abhi tak, I had context defined on the top. These guys have an atom defined at the top. I was wrapping my app inside a context provider. These guys are wrapping the app inside a recoil root, which comes from recoil. I was calling set count from the context API. These guys are getting set count using some function called use set recoil state. Don't worry about the name. I was again getting it in the increase function. These guys are again getting it from use set recoil state. Here is how I was getting the count. Here is how these guys are getting the count. So code structure to looks very similar, but it is much more optimized than what we have written on the left. Let's see if that is the case. Let me copy this code, replace the code that we had written with this code on the left, on the right. Go back to Google Chrome, and aate hi it gives me an error. Here Kirat, recoil is not defined. I need to install the recoil library. npm install recoil. It's an external library. Redux is an external library. It doesn't come bundled with React. So I have to install that external library. I have done that over here. Now if I refresh, let me run npm run dev, refresh. App looks the same. Structure look the same. Have the renders been optimized? Go to components, make sure it's checked. Refresh, increase. Do you see only this guy is re-rendering? The functions that shouldn't re-render, the buttons that shouldn't re-render, aren't re-rendering. This is the benefit that a library like Recoil will provide you. It will understand very well कि यहाँ पे the component needs to render, यहाँ पे the component doesn't need to render. It will render the correct places, not render the components that don't need. The more rendering you are doing, the worse your performance is in React. Doesn't matter at this scale. Re-render happens on clicking a button, that's fine. If you are creating a game that is running at 60 FPS and you can optimize the re-render there, then you'll see real benefits over there. So this is how you can use the state management library. Of course, I can't expect you guys to understand the code ekdam se. We'll go through state management in the next section or like in the next videos or live class. But I'm just using an external library and using functions from it. I'm defining an atom, not defining a context, wrapping it inside a context or whatever, a recoil root. Using use set recoil state over here, using use recoil value over here. This thing does re-render. These two don't re-render. Let's do a poll and call it. I'm going to answer questions now. I have slightly short on time today, but that is all that I had for today. If you understood everything, feel free to drop off. I'm looking at Q&A for a while. Sort of understand. 83%, 84%. Great. Oh, drop down to 81%. Give me questions. Redux recoil same. No, they're different. पर भैया स्टेट को चीफ मिनिस्टर मैनेज करता है ना. That's good. Context API versus recoil. Why recoil is better? If I can achieve less re-renders in context API as well. Well, I mean, you can. Yeah, that's a good question. You can try to optimize it really bad and reach less re-renders, or just use a library where all those optimizations are already done, right? And use the library automatically. Every library, why do you use Express? Why don't you create your own HTTP server? Because someone has written it, reuse that logic. Why do you have to create it yourself from scratch? So don't repeat the logic that's already written by people. Is in a library that you can simply use. It gives you very nice constructs that you can use like this, exports these functions that you can use so that you don't have to, of course, कुछ special थोड़ी लिख दिया इन्होंने. They are still working with the React API only. And they have written a lot of tree logic. Go through their introduction video. It's very nice. They have written a lot of logic that optimizes all of this. You can write it, but rather just use the library, right? इससे अच्छा तो एक दिन का कोड ऐसे री-रेंडर नहीं हो रहा था. इससे अच्छा तो day 1 का कोड ऐसे समझा नहीं मैं. Recoil part is fine if you don't understand, because anyways, we'll do recoil again in a separate video. I just wanted to show you why is it better. To recap, I have defined an atom rather than defining a context. Let me open this code on the right and open the original code that we wrote on the left, which is this code right here. Both the codes do the same thing. The code on the right is slightly more optimal. यहाँ पे create a context called count context. यहाँ पे create an atom. What is an atom? It's just a name that recoil people have given. Whenever you want to store state, store it in an atom, because atom molecule, that's where they've picked the name from. Here, I created my own context provider, which I wrapped the application inside. Here, I wrapped my application inside the recoil root. Here, the decrease function got the count from the context. Here, the decrease function gets the count from use set recoil state. Same for increase, same for increase. And lastly, the value function gets the count from, again, the context. Here we use recoil value. So API is a little different, but under the hood, it's doing so many things that, optimizes the whole process. Alrighty, more questions. Chair ki company, I don't know. So it's a friend's office. I have no idea. Probably some local brand only. Class is over officially. Good to go, guys. Just answering questions now. That too only for like 5 more minutes. Then I have to call it early today. You can reduce renders by using Memo. I'll do either cover it live or an offline video. That's one of the reasons why renders are happening, because the parent is re-rendering that is causing all the children to re-render. You can optimize it that way. But if you use recoil, you don't have to do that either. Recoil also does a bunch of other optimizations. Go through their intro video. They explain how they've written the library and, how they figure out everything. But yes, exactly. You can use the Memo API to, optimize re-renders, and the decrease and increase function will not re-render in that case. Will they ask me to optimize context API in interview? No. Will they ask you to convert context API into recoil? No. They will ask you what the context API is. They will probably ask you to create a provider. They will ask you to use one. Context can get very complicated. This is like a simple context that had 2 variables. Sometimes the context has thousands of bad word, like 80 variables. So, your context provider right now, we just put 2 variables here. You can put a lot of them. So, a lot of times people store the complete state of their application inside a context variable. So that might happen. They might test you on using this API. I doubt anyone will ask you, okay, given this, create something like recoil. So when we define wrapper in a separate file, where is the context created? If you define a variable in a separate file, where is it created? The other file, but eventually it all becomes the same file, right? If you build your React project, you spit out a single file, or sometimes in various chunks. So where is the variable created? You can say it in a separate file, but in the end, when the code actually runs, there's a single JavaScript bundle that comes out, right? So everything is present there. लेकिन भैया मैं तो Redux पढ़ लिया. That's good. I mean, yeah, you can skip. I mean, you don't skip the context API, but yeah. Yeah. So the way to optimize re-renders in the context API is to use the Memo API. Read through it. There are 2 functions in React: use Memo and React.memo. When you use React.memo here, it will help you save out on re-renders. लेकिन भैया क्या हो गया Notion docs. I think we're moving decent now. Yeah, because if React is done and the next is done, then the good parts are done. Then it's just more hard stuff. So I think in another month we should be in a decent state. All right. In recoil, I want to do more than one provider. How can I do that? More than one provider. I'm assuming you mean you want to store multiple states, so you can store them like this: user state, and then whatever name, Harkirat, something like this. So this is how you can create multiple atoms. And in case of the context API, you can either create another context, wrap your application inside another context provider, or pass more values inside if you want to pass more values. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go to the bottom. Okay, I'm just opening Notion docs now. I only have like another minute or so. I saw a very big one before. I'll try to upload them as soon as possible. They are on harkira.classes.co.in. Like, we're up to date here. We're not up to date on app.100xs.com. So just go here for the latest videos. They, come up quick here. I hope you're doing well. I'm reading about Pakistan. See the experience well. Oh, along with experience in Node.js. I specialize in REST APIs and have done. Okay, let's see. Do you know CodeIgniter as well? Ooh, enticing. If you know CodeIgniter, not PHP Laravel, but CodeIgniter, then we can talk. and I can connect you to a company. They'll definitely pay much more than this. Their budget is much more, but since you've told me you make 4, they'll probably offer you some bump on top. I don't know how comp would happen from India to Pakistan, but there is this company that's looking for 3 coding nighter engineers, which is again a PHP framework. I'm sure if you know Laravel, you remove that. So can you ping 100x devs Twitter? And if your profile is right, seems like you have some experience, I can connect you. They might not pay 2x your salary, but somewhere close maybe. So all right, that's done. Can you share me? I want to know how VLC Media Player. Oh, played. I looked. Yeah, exactly. It uses most media players. If you want to create your own React. Yes, you should. There's this video recently. Someone made something like React in C. So you can actually make something like React, which is just a diffing engine, in Golang, in Rust, in C. So yes, we probably should. Great video title. This here, yes, anytime you're playing video, the difficult bit is encoding and decoding video. Video is not, what is video? If it was just a bunch of frames, then playing it is just showing one frame after another, but it's not. It uses a bunch of encoding algorithms, H264, AV1. So you need to understand how encoding algorithms work. Itna time kis pe hai? So people use FFmpeg, which has all of these encoding algorithms to create platforms like VLC Media Player. Songs use different phonetics. This is a good idea. But when we listen to Spotify, simply but think, can we build an extension which takes the lyrics and then animates them using Canvas API? Lyrics. Yeah, this is a good idea. I would, go to a website that is showing me lyrics in various ways, and maybe, so this is an idea that I had a really long time ago. Filmmaking brain of mine. Okay, we need to create, every video that's out there, the most popular song that you can think of today. Munni Badnaam, let's say, needs a better video. Like these old Bollywood people will throw a lot of money, make the worst video out there. Someone else can create a better video. Like create a channel where better versions of the same audio are coming, so people are listening to yours. Of course, you won't make any money; you'll get copyrighted. But you can eventually charge companies. Okay, we will create music videos for you because ours go viral. They hit a nerve. This sounds similar. Okay, if I'm on YouTube.com/some video, I'll just replace it with YouTubebetter.com. where there is a better version of that video. Audio is the same, but the video, to kick things off, is lets you choose from various lyrical. This is a great project idea. I'll probably put this in a video. Someone will create it. But YouTube is very clunky, right? In the sense, algorithm after algorithm feeding you more things. Better YouTube, where you put the first video and then you get some good recommendations, and at the same time, various ways you can see, various videos you can see, UIs you can see of the same audio. Because sunni to sabne audio hi hai. The most played things on YouTube are songs only, but different video for it. I don't want to see, that guy dancing on Despacito every time. I want to see some woman dancing the next time maybe. So, try various variations like this. This is a great idea. You should try it. Now the problem is how to animate lyrics. Oh, yeah, there are most of these lyrical files are like SRT files, which have this timestamp has this time has this. So just pass the file, go from there. What's difficult over there? You see, I have some ideas in mind, but I don't have idea how to build it. This should be very simple to build. If you've gone through the course until now, I think you can build this. Of course, you have to learn about the Canvas API, which isn't too difficult. But you should build this. If someone else should build this, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. I know how people on Spotify listen to songs which watch some lyrical. Yeah. A lot of people do this. I'm not me, but my friends show me, lyrics dekho ye. So I see it. All right. Very nice Allen UI. I think I will have to call it here though. Routing is not working, but just the landing page is pretty good. You cloned it to... deserves a bounty, I would say. So $50 bounty for our friend, whoever our friend is here. The first one who built Pixel Perfect. Would have been more if you had these pages working, but a great start. Love it. Like the fonts, everything is copied dot to dot. Very good. Create some more and then we can talk for a referral as well. All right, we will good night, guys. Have a good day, and sorry I had to call it a little early today, but hope you guys had fun. We'll do an offline video on custom hooks. Let's see if we can quickly cover state management also, in an offline video. Then we can quickly sprint to projects and then Next.js. If not, then next week we'll be doing state management and we'll go from there. Have a good night, folks, and stay safe. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.